Okay, welcome, very warm welcome everybody. Thank you so much for your interest for joining us today for this webinar about the CSR Risk Check tool in the context of European human rights and environmental due diligence regulation. We've organized this webinar today to show you the new features since we've just recently relaunched a new version of the tool, to furthermore take you along in how to use this CSR Risk Check tool in preparation for upcoming regulation, as stated in the title, but also to elaborate on how we work together on a European level to provide and are able therefore to provide you with this tool. Let me go to the next slide. Works. Oh. Yes. So we'll start with the introduction, then I will give a live demo of the tool and its new features. Subsequently, Yannick will tell you more about really using the tool in practice in your risk analysis. And then we'll dive into the European cooperation with insights from Germany as well as from Switzerland. And at the end, we have time for a Q&A. So please keep all your questions or remarks until the last part of this webinar today, and we will be happy to answer them. So my name is Marit Berkelaar. I'm program manager and team coordinator at MVO Nederland, or CSR the Netherlands, if you would translate it directly. We are an independent networking organization and work together with companies on sustainability and making the economy more future-proof. And I will tell a bit more about it later on. About MVO Nederland. And my role is also, I'm responsible for the project management of the CSR Risk Check tool. So therefore I'm hosting this webinar today. Yannick, can I please invite you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Marit, and also a very warm welcome from my side as well. I'm a project manager at the German nonprofit organization UPJ. We are a sustainability network for corporate responsibility and social engagement. And in our network, there are engaged companies, and we offer those companies a place for cooperative advice, confidential exchanges, and personal interaction in order to jointly further develop various sustainability topics. And companies of all sizes, from large to small, are members of our sustainability network. And with regard to the CSR Risk Check, I'm particularly responsible for the development of the tool's German website. And now I pass over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Yannick. Thank you, Yannick, and very warm welcome from my side as well. My name is Jenny Ohme. I am coordinator at the German Helpdesk on business and human rights. We are a government support program for companies providing free and individual and confidential advisory services on the implementation of effective human rights and environmental due diligence processes. And we have been a partner of MVO on the CSR Risk Check since 2018, partnering with UPJ on the implementation of the German version. And I'm handing over to you, Nadia.
Yes, thank you very much, Jenny, and also very warm welcome from my side. I'm Nadia Meyer. I'm working for the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs. And in this role, I'm representing Switzerland in the OECD Working Party on Responsible Business Conduct. And I'm also working for the National Contact Point for Responsible Business Conduct in Switzerland. And with this, I hand back to Marit.
Yes, thank you all, and looking forward to your additions today. As you could see, we are here online with people from several parts in Europe, and there's a reason for that, and that's because we work together internationally for providing this tool. So a little bit of background. MVO Nederland is the legal owner of the CSR Risk Check and all its data. And we have been commissioned by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Development Cooperation to develop it 10 years ago. And therefore, yeah, we first developed a Dutch and a English version, but later on in 2018, I'm very happy that the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development also joined our partnership, and we were able to develop the German version. And since last year, the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, which is Nadia, is representing, is also part of our partnership in the form of a pilot project. And we're very happy that UPJ is responsible and can help us with working on a German version of the tool, so we can provide it also in that language. So a little bit of background about MVO Nederland, or CSR the Netherlands. We are a networking organization. You could also call us the movement for the new economy, entrepreneurs, and together with our network of around 2,000 organizations, a lot of small and medium enterprises, but also bigger companies, we work towards a future-proof economy. And what does this entail? Well, an economy that is climate neutral, inclusive, circular, but also very importantly, built around fair supply chains. And this is the topic in which we will dive further today. So what are we doing to achieve this goal? We are matchmaking, creating networks, bringing stakeholders together, and thereby setting up innovative projects, of which the CSR Risk Check is an example. To really show how we can take the next steps in this sustainability journey. And furthermore, we also lobby for the right environment that is needed to make this transition towards, and we lobby towards governments and financial institutions. So that's very briefly about MVO Nederland, and then I would like to take you further along in the CSR Risk Check tool. So the tool is a tool that can help you by doing your risk analysis, and the core of, it's based on the OECD guidelines, which ask companies to perform due diligence. And I think probably the majority of you is already aware, but maybe if you're newer to this topic, I would briefly like to explain it. Due diligence is the process in where you take, as a company, responsibility for negative impacts that you can create in your international supply chain, and where you also act to seize, prevent, or mitigate these impacts. And there are 6 steps that you should conduct. So first of all, setting up policies, rolling these out also in your management systems, identifying and assessing the possible negative adverse impacts that you might be causing or contributing or related to. And therefore the tool comes in, the CSR Risk Check tool, to look these up. I will explain this later on further. And after that, it's very important to prioritize, because often you cannot take action related to all these topics at once. And there the tool can help you with the Quick Check Priority tool. And then it's very important to really take action. As a 4th step, you have to track if what you're doing is effective. Are you reaching your goals? Communicate about it, and also provide for remedy in case something really has occurred, or participate in grievance mechanisms. So that is in short the due diligence process. And as this is the core of international guidelines, we also see that parts of this, or that the OECD guidelines are not mandatory, but that there is more and more legislation that is mandatory, is actually upcoming, where companies have to comply with, such as the CSRD, the CSDDD, and the EUDR. And we believe if you have this process well in place, that you're very well prepared for all this legislation. By which, and even if you're not a big company that is directly falling under this legislation, you could still encounter the effects, as your off-takers or suppliers might ask you questions related to it. And overall, the goal of the tool is to stimulate companies to create less negative and more positive impact in their supply chain. Yeah, I think I've already explained that the tool has been developed 10 years ago, actually 11 years already to be precise this year. That is financed currently by 3 governments, the Dutch, German and Swiss, that we're working together with UPJ for the implementation. I wanted to stress that we're always open for new partnerships and adding new languages, because our goal is to make the impact as big as possible and let as many companies as possible profit from all the information in this tool. So therefore, really, please reach out to us in case you would be interested to collaborate in the future. Very important, as it is a governmental tool, that it is free, anonymous and very easy to use. So really in a few clicks, which I will show you later, you have access to a huge database of information with possible risks that you can encounter in your supply chain, but also with advice on how to act and to mitigate them. The target group is SME, so smaller and medium enterprises, but we see that large companies use the tool as well, especially, for example, when the German Due Diligence Act entered into force, we saw a large rise in bigger companies using it. And what I said already, it's based on international guidelines, such as the OECD guidelines and the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. At the moment, the CSR Risk Check contains a database which contains knowledge from over 3,500 open online sources. These are not older than 5 years old, because then we will update them and add new ones. And based on this information, and we do a credibility check, of course, we have information about 6,000 risks and advice related to products and/or countries. And a lot of it is qualitative data. So in a few sentences, the database gives you information that is relevant and concrete. And if you want to dive in further, you can access the full source yourselves. It's covering 400 product categories. We follow the SITC product classification, which is a UN classification covering all countries, and they are categorized in an index of 22 CSR themes. And here you can see the CSR themes, which are, for example, themes related to fair business practices, labor rights. So think about labor conditions, but also child labor, discrimination, the environment, such as biodiversity, deforestation, air, water pollution, etc., and human rights and ethics. So, as there is a lot of development in the field of due diligence, we have updated the tool and launched a new version of it in December 2023. And we're happy that there are several new things that you can do, also based on feedback we've received from our users. So the first new asset of the tool is that you can select multiple countries and multiple products at the same time, because that was a point of feedback that we received a lot of times at companies, especially with a lot of supply chains from a lot of different countries, that it was very not so efficient for them to find information in the database. So now you can select 1 to 5 products and 1 to 5 countries at the same time and make a bigger query. As this query then generates quite a lot of data at the same time, it's also possible to filter. So what do you want to zoom into and what not? Furthermore, we're catering to different audiences, which means that both people who are very well known with the topic can immediately access the tool and get the relevant information out, but we're also providing background information if you're very new and want to learn more on where to start. And finally, there's a better visibility of the additional tools, because The risk check tool is the main part of this website, but there are also other relevant applications part of the website, which you can then later on use. And I wanted to share the big news that since last week, it's possible again to download the PDF reports. This was possible in the last website, but not in the most recent version. And we received a lot of feedback that users really wanted this, so we've brought that option back. So and furthermore, it's very important to highlight that we're always further developing the tool. So if you have feedback for us, both on the content or on the technicalities, please reach out to us. At the end, we will share our email address, because this is the best way we can improve the tool and make the optimal version. And then I would like to take you along in a short live demo of the new version. So please stay along with me. So I want to show you how to really use the tool in practice. Here you can see the new homepage, the 4 tools that we are providing. And on top, you can immediately go to start a check or learn more on how to get started if you're less familiar yet. Then you can select multiple products. So let's start with coffee. And just imagine you're importing quite a few different products. So not only commodities, but also plastics you want to look up. Then you can select multiple countries, up to 5 at the moment. So let's say, then you click go to the next step. It's optional to save your result and log in with an account, but you can also continue without an account. You can choose in which language you want to have your results displayed. And then you press the view your result button. Oh, and then I see it's a little bit slow, so I will go to the next tab where I've already, you can see the result of my query. So as it is quite a broad query, you can see there are 169 risks related to these products, countries, or product country combinations. And then I can open, for example, if I'm interested in labor rights, can open this tab and see all the risks related to this topic, but also view the advice that can help you further along in tackling these risks or mitigating them. And what is new in this website is that you can also say, okay, I only want to see the information on palm oil from Indonesia at the moment. So you deselect the other ones, and then you automatically see just the information related to the things you've selected. And also important to note that below there's a section with CSR organizations. These are also really organizations related to your query, so really to the country or the products you've selected. And the same accounts for supply chain initiatives and guidelines. This is also really coming from our database, which we keep up to date to make it as relevant as possible. So let's go back to the PowerPoint then. Jessica, can you please open the slides for me? Yes. And here you can see again the extra modules we also offer. So besides the risk checker tool itself, there's a quick check priority tool, which helps you based on several questions to prioritize then when you found this big amount of information on where to start. There's a roadmap, which gives you practical advice on the due diligence process. And there's a checklist on influence or how to increase your leverage in your supply chain. So actually to have more influence in mitigating risks. Then finally, there are some boundaries and conditions also to the tool. We can only display risks related to a specific product or a specific component of a product, but not risks related of all the possible components are displayed. And let me make that concrete. For example, you cannot enter a car and see all the risks that are related to all the possible components of a car, because we really would need more information to know where does your specific car consist of. So at this moment in time, you have to look up that information yourself. Maybe in the future this could be a great addition to add, but at the moment it's not the case yet. Most risks are qualitative. Unless the data source gives a score, then we also include the score in the database. We do not name and shame companies, but we really only provide information on products, risks related to a product or a sector in general. The tool is owned by MVO Nederland, and we work together with several project partners, but it's very important to highlight or stress that the information is not our opinion nor of our project partners, but really only based on the open online public credible sources that are included in the tool. Okay, and then I would like to hand over to Yannick to take you along in how to practically apply this tool in your risk analysis. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marit, for your initial introduction and input and live demo on the CSR Risk Check. And as you have already touched on, the risk analysis, can be seen as, like the central part of the due diligence process. It helps you to understand the human rights and environmental risks in your supply chain, and it identifies where exactly in your supply chain you need to take action and what kind of measures you need to implement in order to tackle the negative impacts in your supply chain. And the more carefully the risk analysis is carried out, the more targeted you can implement such specific measures like the grievance mechanism, or also prepare your reporting. And in the next few minutes, I would like to give you an example of how a potential risk analysis can be carried out using the CSR Risk Check and its information on human rights and environmental risks. But before you can start with your risk analysis, you should first try to create transparency in your supply chain, and you can firstly do this by mapping your general operations and the structures of your supply chain. And this supply chain mapping should cover all the steps related to the production of your product or the provision of your services. So every step from the extraction of raw materials to the further production processes to the transport and the company's own business areas should be mapped in this process. And this is important in order to firstly identify your suppliers, where they are located and where your raw materials are coming from. And in practice, you can generally say that CSR risks are more common at the beginning of the supply chain. In other words, often in countries where the rule of law is rather weak. So here, once you have an understanding of your supply chain structure, you can start to identify the countries and industries in your supply chain and where human rights and environmental risks may be present. And the risk analysis can generally be divided into 2 consecutive steps. Firstly, an abstract risk analysis should be carried out. So once you have mapped your supply chain, you should identify in which production processes, in which industries, and in which countries potential risks can occur in your supply chain. And the aim of this step is to identify your suppliers that are most likely to be connected with significant human rights and environmental risks. And once you have identified the products and countries with the most serious potential of human rights and environmental risks in your supply chain, you should investigate whether these potential risks are actually occurring in your supply chain. And for this purpose, especially internal information must be analyzed, for example, from your company's own operations, from your suppliers, from your employees and your supplier employees. You can get information, or also from NGOs or trade unions that provide independent information on the situation of those affected. But yeah, what role does the CSR Risk Check play in this risk analysis process? The CSR Risk Check primarily helps you with the potential risk analysis by providing, as Marit has demonstrated to you, by providing free and reliable country and product-related risk information that can occur in your supply chain. And I've brought with me some examples that illustrate how you can systematically analyze the potential risks in your supply chain. So, yeah, firstly, let's, for example, assume that you are a car manufacturer. So you produce electric cars, and for this you purchase also electric batteries. And these car batteries contain many different raw materials, including minerals and metals, like rare earth metals. And yeah, while mapping your supply chain as car manufacturer, you have found out that your electric battery supplier uses nickel from Indonesia. Then in the CSR Risk Check, you can search for nickel in Indonesia, and as a result, the tool will display the following risk in the theme deforestation, which says nickel mines have cleared at least 76,000 hectares of forest in Indonesia. So the affected parties by these risks are, of course, first the environment, but also local communities in Indonesia affected. Why? You might ask. Yeah, trees and forests are cut down for nickel mines. And nickel mining in Indonesia also leads to soil and water pollution in these mining areas in Indonesia. And all of this has a negative impact on the livelihoods of local communities who live nearby these nickel mines. And yeah, additionally, in the last step of this research, the CSR Risk Check also provides you with the corresponding publicly available source for each risk. And you have also now again the possibility to download the PDF report of your risks, meaning you can document it. So you can document every risk accordingly. And you can proceed in a similar way for all the other raw materials of your product. Another example would be the sourcing of cobalt. And also during your supply chain mapping of your car battery, you found out that your supplier is also using cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So if you search for cobalt and Congo in the CSR Risk Check, you will find, among other risks, the following risk in relation to child labor, which says children in the Democratic Republic of Congo are subjected to child labor in cobalt mining. Here, the persons affected would be children. Cobalt mining in Congo often takes place in illegal and poorly secured mines, where minors work, and these children are exposed to serious safety risks, such as collapsing mines or lung diseases caused by the mine dust. And also here, same procedure. You should also, and with the CSR Risk Check, you can document this risk as well. And one last example, since you can not only search for raw materials and products in the CSR Risk Check, but also for services. And one service that many companies are using is the road transport. So yeah, let's assume you're hiring a logistics company in Europe and would like to analyze potential risks for, and for this you also use the CSR Risk Check. And here the following risk is displayed in the theme wages, which says European truck drivers are often paid for wages, and in some cases, wages are also withheld. And in fact, road transport services in Europe are often subcontracted to companies in Eastern Europe that pay really poor wages to their truck drivers or even withhold the wages. And they also sometimes illegally avoid paying the minimum wage. So for example, if a truck driver from Eastern Europe delivers his load to a company in Germany, he must be paid the German minimum wage while working in Germany, in fact. So to summarize these examples following this procedure, so first mapping your supply chain so that you create transparency in your supply chain, understand where your suppliers and so on are located, and then analyzing the potential risks. You can use the CSR Risk Check to check all your raw materials, products, and services for potential human rights and environmental risks, and you can document it accordingly. And yeah, now that you are aware of the potential risks in your supply chain, you should, in the next step, check whether these potential risks are actually occurring in your supply chain. And yeah, with the information from the CSR Risk Check, you can now do an in-depth assessment of these potential risks and can start the concrete risk analysis. You can already prioritize which suppliers have the highest likelihood and severity of potential risks. And then you can take a closer look at these risks first, which you have prioritized. And for this purpose, you can also use our free Quick Check Priorities tool. And in this Quick Check Priorities tool, you can select several products and countries that you have previously searched for. And after answering a few questions, the tool will then assess which potential risk is the most urgent based on likelihood and severity of the risk. So the Quick Check Priorities therefore helps you to make an initial assessment of which risks are most likely and severe in your supply chain, and therefore should be tackled first. But yeah, I've also to admit that the Quick Check Priorities tool is no complete substitute for prioritizing your risks. Because for a detailed prioritization, you also need to evaluate your internal information as well, which of course we do not have. And yeah, in this concrete risk analysis, you should now identify the actual negative impacts in your supply chain, particularly on the basis of your internal information. And I'm sure you will probably have some information about your suppliers yourself, for example, from audits or supplier assessments. And of course, you should also contact your supplier for an in-depth assessment if you have the idea that a potential risk may occur at this supplier. So you can also interview employees. You have also the possibility to ask NGOs or trade unions for independent information, because NGOs and trade unions also working on the ground and know the situation of the people affected. So to summarize this risk analysis process briefly, it can be said that all this information from the CSR Risk Check therefore serves as kind of basis for filtering risk information, narrowing down which suppliers and risks you should analyze in detail in the concrete risk analysis. And yeah, once you have identified actual negative impacts in your supply chain, you should then prioritize them once again and assess which of these negative impacts you should tackle first. And of course, this is then followed by suitable measures you should implement in your supply chain. And yeah, I hope with my short presentation, I was able to give you a good impression, a good first impression of how a potential risk analysis can be implemented. And yeah, now I'm happy to pass it on to you, Jenny, and look forward to your input on the cooperation on European level.
Thanks a lot, Yannick, for this overview of how the CSR Risk Check can be used in the process of conducting a risk analysis. We have been very happy as the German Helpdesk on Business and Human Rights to have worked with you as UPJ, as our implementing partner for the German version of the CSR Risk Check that we have had since 2018. So I saw that there are already a lot of questions in the chat. We will be very happy to respond to them very soon in the Q&A session. But before that, we just briefly also wanted to share some observations with you concerning how the CSR Risk Check is used in our experience here by German companies, especially now, of course, in the context of the mandatory due diligence legislation that we have had in place, the German Supply Chain Act. Now, as a brief background, we as a Helpdesk on Business and Human Rights, we have existed since 2017. And so the translation of the CSR Risk Check into the German language was actually the first big project that we took on. And the background was that we saw that this really is a great tool that was developed by the Dutch, by MVO, and we did not see any need to reinvent the wheel and to develop another risk analysis tool, but rather we saw the chances in translating the existing tool, which existed in the English and in Dutch language into German in order to make it more accessible to German companies as well. Now we have had quite a good number of users for the German version since the start, since 2018. However, of course, since the adoption of the German Supply Chain Act, as you can see here in the graph, that was in 2021, there really has been a surge in users, which of course shows that the tool is very well used by German companies in the context of implementing the legal obligations to conduct a risk analysis under the German Supply Chain Act. Now, Yannick, of course, already spoke about how this can be done, but we would like to, or I would like to add some observations from our dialogues with German companies. And there we see that often there is a very systematic integration actually of the tool in the risk analysis processes that companies are developing. However, of course, approaches do also differ. So while there's some companies that very much rely on the tool as a primary source for the abstract risk analysis, which of course also shows the very high importance of qualitative sources included in the tool. There are others that rather use other indices or other data sources for their abstract risk analysis and then use the tool for validation of their data points. And we get a lot of great feedback from German users on the CSR Risk Check, and we're especially very happy that the PDF report download function is back again, because we did get the feedback from a lot of companies that are especially using the tool in the context of legal obligations, and they're very happy about this PDF function. Now, I also thought it might be interesting for you to show what the most searched countries are by German users. And actually, as you can see here, Germany is actually the country that is most used by German users, which of course we welcome, because it shows that there is an awareness by companies that human rights risk or environmental risks do also exist here in Germany. At the same time, however, and as Yannick showed earlier, of course, we also encourage companies to use the tool also to get an overview of potential risks deeper down in the supply chain, where some severe and aligned risks might, of course, also exist. And as you can see here, some of the most searched products here include agricultural products such as vegetable oils, coffee, tea, and cocoa, as well as clothing, apparel, textiles, transport, storage, iron, steel, electrical machinery, IT services, facility management, tubes, pipes, plastic. So the range of the products and resources and services that are searched for is very, very diverse. Now, looking, of course, into the future, and also looking at the latest regulatory developments that have been happening in Europe, of course, we are seeing now that the CSR Risk Check can play a great role in helping companies prepare for the implementation of the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. And we have provided here an overview of different CSR Risk Check categories. Marit showed them earlier, that can also help with the implementation of a risk analysis for the CSDDD, which clearly outlines that also the first step of the risk analysis should be a mapping of potential risks. And as you can see here, there's a broad range of different categories, such as climate and energy, biodiversity, and direct deforestation. I'm not going to name them all, but all of these can truly feed into a potential risk analysis. And then, of course, aside from the CSDDD, I also already saw a question in the chat on the CSRD, the ESRS, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. Yes, the CSR Risk Check can, of course, also support the reporting with regarding to these standards. And indeed, there is a great overlap actually between the categories of the CSR Risk Check and the ESRS. And we're happy to speak about that also later on. And then lastly, of course, relating to the EUDR, the EU deforestation regulation, of course, as you can see here, there's also a category on the aspect of deforestation. So yeah, we are looking forward to more users of this tool, of course, now in the context of European regulation. And as a representative from a German support program, I can recommend any representatives from other governments that might also be in this call here, or international organizations, to partner with MVO on the tool to perhaps translate the tool also into other languages and make it more accessible to a broader range of companies. In this context, of course, we're also very, very happy about the cooperation that we have started with the Swiss government since last year, also on the German version of the tool. And this is why I'm very happy to hand over to you now, Nadia.
Yes, thank you very much, Jenny. As previous speakers have already said, from the State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, we do agree that the CSR Risk Check can really make an important contribution for companies to implement regulation and also international standards on responsible business conduct. Swiss companies will be strongly affected by the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive from the EU and also from the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Swiss companies will need to comply with these two regulations if they're active in the EU or if they are suppliers to European companies. So thousands of Swiss companies will be affected by the regulations indirectly. In view of the great economic interdependence with the EU and Switzerland, and also in view of a level playing field he has actually decided to take 2 steps. The first one with regard to the CSRD is to draft a legislation and which is aligned with the CSRD and to submit it for public consultation in summer 2024. And the second one with regard to the CSDDD is that the Federal Council has taken note of an external study on the impacts of the CSDDD on Swiss companies. And now that the CSDDD has been adopted by the EU, he will update the study. Based on the analysis and also on the observation of how other EU member states will implement the directive, the Swiss Federal Council will then also decide on the way forward. Currently, we do have mainly 2 regulations in Switzerland regarding RBC. The first one is an obligation to report on human rights, labor, environmental, and anti-corruption risks, measures, and also their effectiveness. And there's a second one, whereas companies have to carry out a due diligence regarding conflict minerals and also child labor. This second regulation is based on the EU ordinance on conflict minerals and also on a relevant OECD guidance. The regulations have entered into force in 2022, and by this year, companies need to present their reports on the implementation of this regulation. And with this, we can go to my second slide, please. So the Swiss Federal Council does expect from companies also that they implement international standards on responsible business conduct, as for example, the OECD guidelines. So as a national contact point, we do promote the OECD guidelines very actively. And if there are alleged violations, we do also offer mediation to NGOs, trade unions, and companies. Furthermore, the OECD has also developed sector agnostic and also specific guidance on due diligence. The CSR Risk Check does also help to implement the UN Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights, and the Swiss government is currently revising its national action plan. And finally, in view of the EU legislation and also Swiss legislation, the National Councillor Diddley has asked the Swiss Federal Council to more in-depth analyze the impacts of these regulations on SMEs and also to think about possible further measures to support SMEs in this implementation. We do think from the Swiss government that the CSR Risk Check is a very useful instrument in this regard. As it has already been said, it's actually for SMEs, the first step may be to start the due diligence, identify the risks, and also take mitigating measures. In this regard, it also helps to implement any legislation on sustainability reporting. It is particularly useful for SMEs because it's cost-free for the users, and you get to know the risks of 400 products and also 250 countries. So this is why the Swiss Federal Council does support this tool in a pilot project and offers a Swiss webpage to access this important instrument. And we will then also assess how we will go on with the project and whether we will translate it into French and also the Italian language. And this is why we would really like to encourage you to use this tool and also invite other governments to join our common efforts to disseminate the tool as broadly as possible.
Okay, if there's no other questions here, then I think maybe it would be okay for us to close this webinar. And thank you for participating. We hope that it was helpful to you Thank you for showing the slide on closing remarks. We hope that the webinar was helpful to you. Please get in touch with us at any point in time. We are happy to stay in a dialogue. And as has been mentioned before, we will share the slides with you in the coming days. There will also be a recording of the webinar available on our website, the Helpdesk on Business and Human Rights. We will share the link with you on the recording of the webinar, so you can have a look into it again if you have missed a part of the webinar, or if you would just like to rewind the information that we gave today. And yeah, with that, I would like to thank everybody for participating. Thank also the other cooperation partners of this webinar, UPJ, MVO, and SECO. Yeah, happy to stay in touch, and have a great day further.